All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're doing well for time, so we'll get the meeting underway. So, tēnā koutou katoa. Would ask James if you could do the karakia, please.
Do on there. Nā whakatakata hau ki tūru, whakatakata hau ki te tonga, kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai, hi ake, nana ki te atukura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei I mauri ora.
Do we have any apologies?
Just apology from me and Neil Brown.
All right.
No apology from Arapata, so I'm not sure if he's here coming or not.
Okay.
Apologies, mate. Arapata.
Oh.
Might try and make it.
Okay, thank you.
Arapata tries to.
Thanks, Les.
Thank you.
We have a new member from ADC, Roger with him, so welcome you to the group, and we look forward to it. And the reappointment of Emma Mackenzie back as councillor from ECAN, so good to see you back in and well done, so look forward to that. So next thing, minutes, have we? Yep. So the minutes, it's a while ago, August.
Oh, so we missed out the register of interest.
Oh, there's a register of interest in your pamphlets, and as we say, it's up to you to keep them up to date and there for everyone's information. There's been a few changes which are in the new circulation, aren't they, that Chris and everyone brought up, so they'll be kept up to date. So the minutes were circulated on for the meeting for the 23rd of August. Do I have a mover that they're correct, please?
Can I just make a suggestion? There was a mention of thanking Stuart Wilson, and it's not in the minutes. It happened after the meeting, but I just wanted it to be included somehow.
That's a good point, and we did do it. We'd sort of closed the meeting and realised, heavens, we wouldn't see him again, so we did thank him. So we'll record that in these minutes, that we did. I'll give you a few words for that, Carol, but thanks for that, Chris. So Les has seconded the minutes, has moved the minutes to our seconder. Chris, thank you. So is everyone happy that they're true and accurate record? Are there any matters in there that need alteration or? Everyone happy with that? So I'll move the minutes, please. All in favour? So I those against? Carried. I just borrow your agenda.
Yeah, you keep it over there.
Okay. Correspondence. What have we got there?
So we have correspondence. So one item of correspondence inward, which is the thank you letter from the to the Ashburton Water Zone Committee from the Mid Canterbury Catchment Collective for their support.
Just for a full $1 million.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, Angela's
Do you want to speak to that?
is going to speak to the meeting today, but I think we're all thrilled that it was so successful. And as I think Dave Moore said, it was a good investment for our 30,000 K. So
You said that.
I said that. Okay. Right, I said that. Great investment for 30,000. So well done, and we look forward to your presentation later. Right, we're into it then. Public contribution. So there's a few members of the public here, so you're welcome to make a comment or contribute when you feel like you wish to. If you just put your hands up. Mm-hmm. So it's Brent.
And then we're now up to Brett and Pete.
Brett and Pete. So look forward to your presentations. So away you go.
Collaboration group, questions of clarification before we go on to feedback.
No, it doesn't appear to be.
Okay. Sorry.
Now it's back on.
We'll have a backup if we need it. So over to you for feedback online also.
You've obviously done a very thorough job, Brent. The only comment I would make, I suppose, is there's quite a bit of detail there. It's quite a lot of detail and looks a lot of work streams for you to get through. So are you confident we're not making it too complicated?
Great questions, as always. Bill, I mean, this is actually the short list, the priority list at the moment. What you'll see is that the partners in this collaboration group have got leadership of different work streams, and so the Trust's role is to lead some of the work streams and then to have some oversight of the whole program. And so I guess what that means for us as the work streams get going is to keep asking those questions. Are you doing the right thing? Are you investing your time well in terms of the learnings that we need to get? So that's I guess for next year once the work streams get up and running.
Mr. Chairman, I think a shared responsibility will help spread that workload around quite a bit as long as we all know who's doing what, and that's the idea of the collaboration.
Is there one on there? Just looking at your draft priorities list, do you have a time frame for your time frames? Because I notice a couple in there will be quite important for things like the winter grazing regulations coming in, consents needing to go in around April, May next year. So do you have an indication when you might be putting some times beside those stuff? Because there's some interesting ones in there it'd be good to hook into.
Thanks, James. The time frame is that the first task is to set timeframes and expectations and things. So that is the time frame at the moment, is that we need to get it going, and we need to understand what we need to deliver by when, and then make sure that we can get that work done. Yeah. So the short answer is no, but that is the job in front of us at the moment.
Yeah. Do I push something else? No, it just goes. In terms of the biodiversity and also the connectivity, I see that you've got mapping of biodiversity. I'm wondering if, it's really good to have the stories of what's happening, but I wonder if it's actually more important to connect close projects so that they are so that the actual biodiversity that lives within them can have closer, habitat arrangements. So I'm wondering if more effort could be put into the actual connection of those habitats rather than the telling of the stories of them.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the conversations that the Trust are involved in is the Heke Hines River, Kia te Kitai. And so obviously the physical connection for birds and fish, for example, is incredibly important. And so that is part of the aim in terms of the Trust. However, Ange, would you like to speak to that, because your name's against it?
Okay, so just a couple of updates since that meeting. We have engaged with the Waterways Centre, who are the almost secured a summer student to come and to do that stock take, to harness everything, to pull it all together. So the immediate steps funded projects, the QE2, a lot of it can be done on satellite and as a desktop thing. What we haven't managed to get all pulled together is the private landowner stuff that's been happening quietly behind farm gates. So with my Kānuka Trust hat on, we have gathered quite a substantial database of who these people are. So then the other thing that's happening is as the individual catchment groups come together, that stock take is also being undertaken. So we've understood the what and the why of pulling all that together. We just haven't understood the how until we have access to a wonderful student we left our run a wee bit late to ask for one. So that's plan A, but plan B is that if we're not successful, then we will look to perhaps bring in a facilitator who can get that underway. Lots of names gets added to the database and they go forward and interview those people. Just quickly on the winter grazing one that was talked about earlier. So we had a field day on Friday and Eva Harris from Enviro Collective mentioned that they have a collaborative intensive winter grazing project pilot. Not really sure what she called it. There was a lot going on and I actually can't remember who she said it was in conjunction with. However, there's an opportunity to sit down with them at some stage and again, let's try and see if we can all lean in to the spaces where people have put their hand up to show some leadership and some initiative. That's all.
Brendan, if I just ask another question, which I probably should know the answer to, but I'm just trying to find it. But the Hines working group with Boundary Drain Trial and everything like that, how much are you involved in that, your group?
Craig through the Hines Drains Working Party is still leading that bill. So that ball's in the Hines Drains Working Party's court.
Okay.
But Craig is also a trustee on HH Wet. So
that work's sort of done independently. They're doing their work. It's okay. That's
Yep.
fine. Great. Yeah. And
Just to add to that, we had a Lowlands meeting early last month, which Craig came along to and talked to the catchment group about successioning that piece of work into then the catchment group. So obviously we got the traffic light type system, what's completed, what's sort of work. So I think the intention is to pick up some of that and continue on the good work. So that document, that Bible, gets to stay live in that space.
I think the reason I ask that is I'm just trying to think of the year, whether it's 23 or 25, when those water consents are going to be renewed, subject to what the minimum flows and everything are coming up. So it needs to be working. You know what I mean? So long as they keep an eye on it. Yes.
Just add to that, Maria Captain from ECAN is planning to report back to the Zone Committee on the Boundary Drain trial, probably in our February meeting.
Okay.
Yep.
So that was the edge of it, Brent. If there's no more, is any questions or any other comments you'd like to make? Otherwise, we'll go to your next paper.
All right, thank you. So hopefully this paper is self-explanatory too. So obviously the value adds from biodiversity where we are adding water in, for example, into the river system and improving life for the fish. That water is also improving the health of the near river environment by raising the shallow groundwater levels, which means that it is easier for new native plantings to take off and to be supported, provided they're well maintained. And so that is a key aim for our near river projects, to include this biodiversity planting, but the planting and the maintenance obviously come at a cost. And it was probably, was it last year or earlier this year, Dave? I can't remember when we started talking about this. May have even been a financial year ago. So this is an ongoing program. We've got a lot of plants to get in the ground over the next years to decades, and we're seeking to keep moving and to make sure that the survival rates of what we're putting in the ground are right up there, as good as possible. So we had come previously to the committee and talked about the pending Winslow Road River Recharge site. Some of you may have visited that with us. So as you'll see in the paper, because of the long consenting processes at the moment and the uncertainty over timeframes, we're now just holding that one aside till we've got a little bit more certainty over timeframes, given that we've got plants in the ground at the moment that need some maintenance. And so we haven't put a figure on that because we're aware you're going to get some other requests in for your budget. And so we're just keen to make sure that this request is sitting alongside those other requests for your biodiversity funding. So over to you for any feedback.
It's probably a bit remiss of me just presuming a lot, but I think, David, I might get you to just do a quick summary, sort of mainly for Roger's benefit, but just about the Biodiversity Fund, the criteria, and just a little bit about it.
Sure.
I should have done this at the beginning, sorry.
That's okay. So a bit of history. We used to have a Immediate Steps Biodiversity Fund. That was changed a couple of years ago, and now we have zone committees have $50,000 per year at the moment, which they can use to do anything that aligns with the action plan, which is this piece of paper on your desk here. So there are certain things we want to achieve in that action plan, and we have a small budget of $50,000 to be able to help us achieve those things. So we may choose, when we're looking at all our options, this project of Brent's could be something which is a biodiversity initiative, but it could be something else. There could be other things as well. So it's a decision we have to make coming up to probably get some decisions made early next year so that we can get everything done and dusted before the end of the financial year. So I'll probably talk a bit more about this in my facilitator's update later in the session, but that's the background to it. Possibly we may get more money next year if it aligns with our financial year, which is from July to June. That cover it?
Chris, have you got a question?
Yeah, thanks, Brent. Just looking at the bottom picture, is that the one up at Mayfield, the very stony looking one?
That's right.
So that's the one that is quite exposed to or at risk of flood damage?
Not now.
So no longer. So I can't remember. I think the bottom photo, the one with the little flowers emerging. So that was actually the site that was inundated by the flood, and that was the site that we dug up from the silt, and it's got so many nutrients sitting in around it now, and it's been a good year that the plants have just absolutely taken off.
Well, you've gone for a blank check or an open request. If you were giving some guidance for me, if you wanted some money straight away that you could use to utilise efficiently, in the order of what sort of numbers? I'm sort of thinking over multiple applications you could probably get quite a lot done, but
yeah.
Initially, how much would you be looking at to make sure you can spend it and do something?
So the maintenance budget at the moment, I guess, on what we've got in the ground is the most tangible thing. So so in the order of 10K would keep those plants maintained for now. As I noted in the report, we've got, I mean, it's a long river. We could get planting back in autumn again if we have the funds to do that. We have more identified sites up at South Hines, and it's just a matter of root raking out and getting the plants in the ground and extending what we're already doing. So anything above the 10K would contribute to that next stage of planting. The long-term goal down there, you'll be aware, those of you that know the area, down at Ballantyne's Bridge, we have public access. We don't currently have public access from the top end. So in order to get good public access, we need to plant all the way down there, basically clear and plant all the way down there. So that's the long-term goal.
Thank you.
Brent, is there a bit of water in that occasionally or not?
So the Near River Recharge site up there operates off the Rangitata Diversion Race. Yeah. So provided the water isn't high in turbidity, which it was a week or so ago, that site operates 24/7. as long as the South Hines River isn't flowing and it isn't flowing too high, and the Rangitata isn't also flowing too high. So the South Hines up there before that recent weather event was down to 5 litres a second up above the site. And so this is the time of the year when the native fish are trying to find somewhere to be and to hang out. And I walked that bit of river last year, and I mean, you felt like you were stepping on fish. There were so many up there, and so we've been operating at 200 litres a second, which is, massive difference for that little bit of river. So that little bit of river was just about dead, and it's been back to life again. And now, of course, the river fresh has come through, and we've backed off, so the river stays alive.
So just in summary, it's sort of critical to get a bit of marwater in there to keep the biodiversity surviving.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Ange?
Thanks. So, a couple of things, just circling back to the bird life and how important that is. With that, if you build it, they will come. So it would be good to get some input on is there any other plant types that would attract different birds and other biodiversity. Obviously the bittern and the crake, and there was it a white heron? Yeah, which is great, except if they're stealing our fish. Don't know how I feel about that. So my brother lives at just above Farrell's Crossing, so the Winslow site. So he's texting, got Tui in the garden again, Ange. So they've got a significant planting on their property adjacent to the river, which is great. And then I was at Hines School with the Kānuka Trust earlier in the year when the kowhais were flowering, and Carolyn was talking about they had bellbirds in their garden in the Hines Township. So I think we really need to start somehow capturing, how often, and I don't know how we do that. Forest and Bird would perhaps be better to guide us. I think the engagements on that last planting, that significant one that we did, I think it was fantastic. A lot of people are still talking about it, so that can never be underestimated as people will get familiar with our native plant communities. Also, we've got the engagement with the Hikio Hines Hill Country Group with Harley as co-chair of that, so they're just really starting to ramp up their catchment action plan. And the other thing is you're doing a great job on Facebook of updating people as things progress, so I suggest, if you're not, to like or follow Hikio Hines Water Enhancement Trust Facebook page, because I think as we gather those ideas and then we share it, you know how it works. That was all.
Ange, all the plantings going on, you talked about the different types of plants that need to be up there. Has Arafina been consultant and supplier of those plants?
Yeah, that's best taken, correct.
Kia ora, Les. So the nursery's just up and running, obviously, and delivering a lot of plants down to the Rangitata, the Rakitata area. We have been talking with Arowhenua regarding the nursery and future, because we need to plan out ideally a year or few in advance, also with regard to potential future wetland plantings as well. So we have that conversation live with them. Stephen Brailsford has been running our plant management to date, and he has been utilising the eco-sourcing as best he can for the plants, and so. And Steve is also talking with Arowhenua and the Arowhenua nursery. He's been down there with Seth and the like, and working with them. So I think we have the connections there, and hopefully we are setting up well in advance so that we can have the right plants ready, in advance for when they need to go in the ground. That's the intention.
We are in our next financial year, so we're in the position to sort of take applications for this funding. So depending on what the committee is thinking at the moment, but my suggestion would be that it's good that you guys have put a number, or put an expression of interest in. We have got a limited amount, and we know there's a few more in the pipeline. So maybe if you just sharpen up the application a wee bit, just where the money's going to, who's contributing, other bits, and then present it to us at the January or February one, and we can then make a decision. Does anyone else have any comments about that they think it's the right way to do it, or?
Yeah, I'm supportive of that. Yeah, you've given us a good indication of what you can use straight away, but you've got a longer term, so I think you need to split it up to 2, and then save. It makes it quite easy to see that it's actually doing stuff, and I'm really supportive of that.
Edith, did you have a question?
Occurring naturally, so that you are sort of innovating the original. Would that not be the goal?
Yeah, thanks, Edith. So we're obviously taking advice from people who we pay to give us that sort of advice. Obviously, what's changed from naturally is the pest species and the competition, and so we're relying on getting the right advice that these species are both able to survive in the current version of natural, if that makes sense, and also be representative for the area. Having Arowhenua and Brailsford's working together in the space and covering most of that area in itself should give a level of comfort with regard to consistency.
Yes, if I can add a little
Yeah,
bit
sure.
to that. I mean, we've seen Steve's plantings elsewhere, and it is just generally fairly generic, and had a conversation with him about his ecosystem, the cat root. But if you take a little bit of a walk further upstream, or say Blair Gallagher's, to look at the species that are actually growing there, because that's would be the nearest similar way it's similar to what you're looking at. So just to try to repeat that, rather than just convenient, easy to grow species.
I agree. Pete's just noted that the porcupine shrub, for example, all of the porcupine shrub in the area has been seeded from the one plant that we found at South Hinds when we first went there to see. Beautiful, beautiful, sizable plant. Gave off heaps of seeds. They've grown them all. They're also at the Selwyn site now as well, but they're being replanted back and doing really well. Talking with Arowhenua representatives when we're on site up at South Hinds, they could see how well these plants were taking and seeding already, and so they're talking about gathering seeds at those sites from the plants that are doing well there now, the current natural, if you like, and growing them and then bringing them back again. So no, I take your point, and keep talking with Steve too, please, when you see him.
It's a one-sided conversation.
I understand that. He has his views, and we're paying him to do a job, and he's guaranteeing 95%. And so there's there's two sides to the conversation, isn't there?
Yes, I can understand that. We've actually just been on Makaira Island, and there's two species that obviously are very obvious.
Yes.
And then there's a few others here and there. So that's not what I was thinking of. I was thinking of Brad's place, Lee's place. But that just shows how it's not just a whole variety of things that some nursery decides to offer.
Understand.
Yeah, thanks for your comments, Edith. And I think we had a field trip there 3 months ago now, probably, was it? And I think it was very well planted, and they're doing a good job, and your comments are well noted, so I appreciate that. So thanks very much, Brent and Pete, and we'll look forward to seeing your application coming through. Have you got, Jen?
Sorry, I do just have one other question. Brett, it says in the funding request that you've been offered a contribution of $7,500 from Rabo Community Fund. Does that mean that another 2.5 would be the 10K you would need to get going?
Great question. Okay, Pete's going to answer that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good question. The 7.5K from Rabobank was is targeted in the application for the Winslow Road side only.
So we've actually had a follow-up conversation with them about whether they would prefer to move that onto one of our existing sites or hold it back a financial year. They've actually made the decision to hold it back a financial year. So that 7.5 is now not in our current budget for this financial year, but it is sitting there for next year. So they're very keen with the community aspect of the Winslow Road site, the proximity to Hines School, the people travelling down there, and the potential for a little bit of publicity back for them, which they won't get up the top.
Yeah, it's good, Brent. Good question, Jen. So you'll have to have a sharp application, you boys, but excellent. So thank you for that. It does show how important the Mar water is to keep these sites going, to keep the fish going and the plants when there's no. Yes, we'll take that on board. So thank you. Then it's Ange's and
Ange, yes.
we can be collective.
Right down there.
I think also for the benefit, sorry, Roger, you might just do a little very brief slides. You got this one.
Locked and loaded.
I knew it would be. The main branch, you didn't know
Tēnā koutou everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to present. And I'd like to introduce Willie Lefrink, who's one of our committee members and our biodiversity champion. We'll just skip through this. So our background and timeline, I won't read through it. You can see back in 2018, it was when the idea was first mooted, and that was initially going to be a Hikio Hines focus to lean into all the good work that was happening through the Canterbury Water Management Strategy, the Zone Committee, Hines Drains Working Party and others. Around 2020, a local in Eiffleton put his hand up to champion a catchment group in the Lowlands area and shoulder tapped a few people. So we went through the stages of a catchment group. So what is a catchment group? What work has been done here to date? And what are our priorities? What's our next step? So that group is now gone from just being the Eiffleton Biodiversity Collective to taking in Flemington, Eiffleton and Lowcliffe. So it's the Lowlands group, and it's co-chaired by Hamish McKenzie and John O'Connell. So the steering group presented to the Zone Committee just to find out more about whether we had a mandate to continue the work that we'd started. Quite a bit of heavy lifting to get to that stage, as you can imagine, and we had the help of Rose Ackland in particular, who started the Landcare group back in the 1990s, very encouraging, and reinforced just how hard it is to get something like that off the ground. We postponed our initial community meeting thanks to the floods, cracked on 2 weeks later, had a great turnout, over 60 people from the Hikio Hines, but also others from outside the district. So the signal was sent that this should be a mid-Canterbury thing, which was fantastic. And at that stage we learned that the Foothills group via David Ackland and others, and the Hikio Hines Hill Country that it's now called via John Chapman, they were interested in forming. So David Ackland, Foothills, and now it's Nick France and Harley Davies chairing the Upper Hines. We became an incorporated society in December, so it's our 1-year anniversary next month. We received $30,000 seed funding from the Ashburton Water Zone Committee for a coordinator, someone to join the dots, be the glue, and just figure out what is happening across our region. I can confirm there's a lot. We submitted our funding application into the MPI Essential Freshwater Fund, so it's MFE money given to MPI to administer. We're one of the first in the country to receive that particular fund, and I'll talk about the criteria for that later on. We've done stage 1 and 2 of our strategy workshop. We had Sarah Howe from Dairy NZ as our facilitator. Awesome facilitation skills, so we've got a whole lot of stuff that we now need to pull into an official strategy, and that's part of one of our KPIs and our milestones with our funding. So it was announced last month that we were successful in attracting $950,000 to invest in our region across the next 3 and a bit years. The initial stages for what felt like a very long time was basically getting our house in order, a lot of I dotting and T crossing to get their foundation really secure, to sort of get to ourselves into a position where we could hold the line until quite a few really important things landed. So that's just some of what that looked like. IT, QGIS, just so many technical things to consider. Part of our strategy session, we figured out who we are. We're community-led. We want to take an integrated approach through the lens of inside the farm gate, and we're built on collaboration and trust. We had a really good example on Friday where we're bringing ideas, action and science together to improve our environmental footprint, support catchment group initiatives and champion community wellbeing. We have been told that collective change empowers communities and encourages everyone to care for our natural resources, and farmers learned best from other farmers. So we want to celebrate the leadership that we've seen across decades, and scale up the positive change that we get to see day to day. So storytelling, using that. It's a shame Pete and Brett left. There they are, our pin-up guys. So people are our greatest asset. Our catchment collective committee, I won't run through the list of names, you can see them up there. Just new to the group over summer is Romy Vanderboom, who's going to be our Mid-Canterbury Water Science Update summer student. She's actually through there interviewing John Moore as we speak, and came to the field day on Friday and got to meet a few people. But if there's an opportunity to introduce her to some Chris Allens and Bill Thomases and long-time water people here today, that would be great. So we've got the Foothills group, Heko Hines, Hill Country, I've just touched on those, the Lowlands group. There's the existing groups up the Upper Rangatata and Whitcomb Landcare Group in the Rakai Gorge. We're talking with the Whitcomb Landcare Group and supported them in a funding application to the Waitaha, am I saying that right, Environment Canterbury thing recently. Unfortunately, they were unsuccessful, but it'd be great to keep that engagement going with them. Early days, but we're talking to landowners in Lagmore Westerfield. We actually have a hui with them on Thursday night in the Lagmore Westerfield Hall, and it's likely one of the landowners' daughters up there will be coming back to the region and quite keen to facilitate that group with a whole bunch of knowledge. Ashburton Lakes, just ongoing discussions to make sure that they're all part of the bigger conversation. Lined up a group in Ashburton Forks. The question is, can we talk about flooding? My answer to them is we talk about what's front of mind for that local community, and if it's flooding in that area that they're in, yeah, absolutely. Ruapuna, and then, I don't know what you call that whole thing, kind of like Rakaya East. So it's Viet and Chertsey, Pendarvis. Got a meeting organised with them shortly with some great leadership in that area. Carter's Creek is one that obviously the Zone Committee signed up for quite some time ago. We've really struggled, despite some enormous input from Willie and others, to get any momentum on that. So when we do secure facilitators, one of the first places that we need to put someone is with that group so that we can advance that project. Henry. This is our stakeholder engagement join the dots list. And a lot of it is, it's circling back on some previous conversations. There's the Ashburton Biodiversity Working Group. There's so many groups, but who's doing what? What's your lane? You know, what they're talking about here with the science collaboration. And Hekio Hines is a really good example of what good looks like. So we'd like to sort of run those collaboration meetings elsewhere. We've done a rural Mid-Canterbury wellbeing collaborative meeting with ADC, quite a few other stakeholders that was really successful, and we've had some good outcomes from that already. We've pulled together an agri-woman discussion group, some 30, 40-somethings, just to talk about what it looks like from their perspective, and started with an event here recently where they talked about cognitive overload and all sorts of other whatever's going on in everybody's lives. So that's not the final group. We're just sort of trying to geographically get a different mix of people, and there's a wee bit of shoulder tapping out there at the moment, and some of those women will ultimately be involved in catchment groups as well, but a lot of knowledge and really keen to share it. We've begun our Runanga relationship building with Arawhenua, and they came to a committee meeting a couple of months ago, so we learnt a lot about what that looks like from their perspective, and Carl is scheduled to catch up with him again shortly. That was our field trip. I have put a handout on some of your desks. Please feel free to take that with you, or I do have an electronic copy if anybody is interested. Some really great discussions, won't go into it now, but that was sort of stage 2 of this is just where the conversation starts. Lots of curious questions, lots of respect. We have a whole bunch of questions. We're looking for some answers, and there were some pretty awesome people there on the day who could help actually give us more questions, probably. The science update you guys are familiar with. Thank you for the $6,000 funding for that. So that will go towards Romy, and the brief update of what that looks like is there. And in more detail, we have a document that I can give to Dave, and it can be circulated. It's just all landing literally as we speak this week. MPI Central Freshwater Fund. So the criteria is what it looks like. So we've started with the improving the long-term capability and capacity. We have a lot of capability in our region, and we should be really proud of that. What we probably don't have is a lot of capacity. A lot of people are up to here, and that's for all the obvious reasons, but there is duplication. So when we identify that, strip it out, or sort of look at how we can better manage that, then we can really start looking at an in-depth gap analysis, which is what Friday was about. MFE have been really clear about the fact that this is not a Jobs for Nature, this is not a fences in the ground, plants in the ground type funding. So we can do case studies. I think there's about 30% of our funding that can actually go to sort of the harder side of plantings and so forth. So creating momentum to improve resilience from within a catchment community. And then the part that I enjoy the most, the monitoring, educating and clearly communicating achievements and lessons from the projects. That's our mind map. It needs to go to a graphic artist. That's Angie's version, but it's all of that. My least favourite column is the business planning, because that's all the I dotting T crossing. But each of those sections has a champion. So Phil Everest is our freshwater champion. Stakeholder engagement is Jake Jarman. Wellbeing is myself and Duncan. We're all across the business planning. Catchment group development, we're all across. Biodiversity is Willie, and soil nutrient and management is Greg Lowe. That's the approach we're taking. That's the integrated look at things from inside the farm gate. With each of those, we come up with an overarching strategy around our vision and values, we put a work program together, then each of those drop downs will have their own strategy. We have developed a very simple, repeatable formula to engage, educate and empower. Knowledge is power, so the more of that we can get scaled up, bell curve in our region, and it's working. I mean, we can see that it's working each and every day. I'm frantically busy trying to keep up with the demand that's out there, which is really positive, and getting a hopefully resource next week. Watch this space. That talks about catchment group development. So when I meet with the Legmore Westerfield people, we talk to them about thinking about the challenges and opportunities that they're facing, pulling a group together, understanding what defines their catchment, take time to celebrate what's going well and what has been achieved to date, and what expertise they have in the group versus what we may need to bring in. And ultimately, they set their timeframes. That's not a prescription, but within the community, they develop a step thing for themselves. As we've become a bit more familiar with that space, we've got a little bit better at kind of guiding them on that. And now, obviously, that we've got secured some MPI money, there are some KPIs and some milestones that they're going to need to meet. And that's it from me.
So is there any initial questions for Ange about her presentation? Ian?
We don't want to hear from you.
I'll take mine off, Tracy.
Or does funding from central government sort of cover the things that the zone committee is trying to do first?
So we'll, as the hub, as the Mid-Canterbury Catchment Collective, no, not us, but each of the catchment groups will have to come up with their catchment action plan and what they want to do in their specific area. So, as I've said, the project doesn't fund the biodiversity projects unless it's a case study. So we perhaps will on something like Staveley Stream where there's some erosion control and they're wanting to trial some different things there. So within our milestones, yes. But if, for example, and I know the Foothills groups are talking about it at the moment, there's a potential to, there's quite a big stream that comes out of Mount Hutt, that's tributary into the Rakaia, some quite bold plans around that and linking in early days with that conversation, that there might be some potential for them to need some funding to support project-specific stuff, but then we will encourage the catchment groups to come to the zone committee in their own right, so they have their own bank accounts, their own treasurer, secretary.
I have lights. and so from what you're describing, it sounds to me like there will be quite a lot of requests coming to the zone committee for the limited amount of money the zone committee has, but in fact it's
So we're in the process at the moment of having a conversation with the Mid-Canterbury Funders Forum. So obviously there's Advanced Ashburton, they have money tagged to environment, not that we're all trying to compete against everybody else, but just looking at what is currently available to realistically, add value, especially across the 3 years, which is a time frame for now, but we are thinking intergenerational and long term. So some of the projects might feel like a really good feel-good in their area, but as a region, how does that fit in? So we've all got our action plans sitting there, and that'll be part of their education and engagement, learning that, well, it looks really, really important to them, and great. However, you might not be the first cab off the rank. But however we do that nicer than that. Does that make sense?
And adding some priorities or advising people on priorities or advising any funders as what you think the priorities are from a overarching position has got to be valuable when there's limited amounts of funds to go around. Yeah, sounds smart. Good. Thanks for Ange.
Just further to Ian's point, is your position funded ongoing through that MFE or MPI funding, or is that something that the Zone Committee needs to look at, the coordinator role which we funded?
So a big part of the criteria was around building the capability and capacity. So I'm funded, our facilitators will be funded, and our upskilling, our people development, so our Treaty of Waitangi courses, there's an Ignite Leadership course that we do here, there's facilitator training, said that wrong, available. I was actually speaking to Craig Pauling the other night at dinner. There's a really good course, I've written it down here, that he recommends that comes out of the Resource Management Act. So all of those, and it's kind of like, really it's ticking the softer skills side of the equation and acknowledging it is about the people. So you can have the best plan in the world. If you don't have the right people on the ground in the regions to implement it, it never really gets its, you don't get your full worth.
I've sort of asked you this before, I think, Ange. What's the plan for inviting other people in the community into these catchment groups who don't already know about it necessarily?
Yeah, sorry, I should have actually added Wakanui up there because obviously we have Wakanui underway. We've pushed pause on that because of the impact that Mycoplasma bovis is having in that local district. We're putting a membership document together at the moment, and its draft form will be tabled at our December meeting. So to become a member, so to qualify for all of this, if you want to access the money and the support and everything else, there will be certain criteria that they have to meet and have to do. So one of those will be to have a community meeting, like we did in Eifelton, like we did in Hinds. So ensure that the wider community have an opportunity to have input into what that looks like. So, yeah, official funding last month, but then going back to the groups with this proposal, I suppose. So what value can we add? Because they will have to pay a membership fee. At this stage, they're all loose as a goose. We've been helping them, but we haven't actually memorandum of understanding or terms of reference or managed to get that detail. We have got it. However, it's just in the final stages before we're ready to present it. And to be fair, those groups have actually had the opportunity to have some input in it as well. What we're doing is quite unique, and I can talk to Thriving South, and then I know that's not really how we do it, and Rangatiki and Taranaki and all around. So we want to get it right, and we want it to be enduring, and we want to set up a model that, once the government funding's gone, that it continues to sustain beyond that. So it does feel like we're taking a long time to get some of these things landed, but I think it's going to be really worthwhile when we do. So part of that will answer your question in terms of, yes, there will be a requirement that there's local district engagement.
Okay. Just first as a comment and then a question. The comment is when funds are allocated or given out, like has been in your case, you see it happening in other organisations where they end up getting too many people involved and a whole lot of money goes out the door. So you just need to be mindful, you don't suddenly have a wage trail or a lot of money going to appointing different people, but I'm sure it won't. So the question is, I'm hoping Willie might come and sit up at the desk and just talk a little bit about Carter's Creek, because it has been on the Zone Committee's radar and our ZIP and everything, and I know you work very hard to get a community going, and are you telling me we're struggling there to make that work, or what's happening?
Yeah. Okay, Carter's Creek, it's like herding cats. The issue is there that we had quite a few staff changes at ECAN. Unfortunately, Lockie Ashton fell away on us, and he was driving it real hard alongside me. The new man that replaced Lockie Ashton was probably interested, but he had a workload in other areas of mid-Canterbury and central Canterbury that prevented him to put it at the top of his list. Other than that, also, I think it was good that the community had to get away from this flood. You know, they were completely focused on the flooding issues in Tynwald. It was probably good to get away from that, and so that they got a bit more of a neutral position on those issues. So I think it's time for a community meeting again. I tried to encourage people from Eken to walk certain tracks of Carters Creek again. I haven't been successful so far. Mr. Dines resigned from Eken. He was going to come with me, and Billy hasn't been back to me, hasn't responded to my emails or text messages. So, yeah, keen to do that, and particularly of interest to me is a certain breakout that happens every time Carters Creek floods, where it threatens the top part of Lake Hood area, and if we can mitigate those situations. Then, also want to get the fencing started soon, because that is of utmost importance to clean up the creek. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good. So I understand
so we
what
hope
you're saying.
to start it in the new year. Yeah.
And I think, Dave, you'll be talking to people in Ecan and make sure there's someone to talk to, Willie, or Willie. And
So you're the new leader?
Yeah, so I'm Billy's manager now, so I'll go and check with Billy and see what.
Yeah, if we can just walk the creek and just make a final plan for every half K or so, what needs to be done.
I'll have a chat with Mark as well, who's replacing at the moment.
Yeah.
Brian, so
Be good to do that. Yeah, thank you very much.
That's great. That's good to see, because I was a bit worried that you'd met Henry and he wasn't happening, but you haven't met Henry, so this is going to be good.
There's
So Henry,
a lot happening. Yep.
there's Willie, and you can see what the challenges are. So thanks for that. Any more
Funding applications from the subcommittee?
funding requests?
Just, not sure whether I should ask or not. In terms of funding for the work you're doing, Willie, do you have funding for what you're doing, or are you looking for
No,
funding?
at the moment, I'm not looking for funding. I just inventarization is the key, and then a community meeting. I hope your Eken will be supportive in that fact, and then from there on, I hope that a catchment group can take the lead on this whole group, and deal for once and for all with the second most polluted creek in Canterbury.
Oh, well, thanks, Willie, for that update. And Anne, is there anything else you'd like to add? Or, Ian?
If I can just follow up on Jen's question really about other people being involved in the catchment collectives. Presumably one of the key ingredients, Ange, is that the landowners who are participating feel safe and trust the other members. So because you're on people's properties, you'll be seeing, not everything you'll see is good, but the intention is to tidy those up. And so one of the dangers would be if the wrong people were there and the landowners felt uncomfortable with potential backlashes for some of the things that people might see.
It seems to be the way that that's been addressed throughout the country is, so initially people need to feel comfortable with the fact that what is this catchment? So there's quite a process there. It's quite new concept to a lot of people. They just think we're another group coming and telling them what to do. So in terms of our MCCC brand, we're very careful with making, I believe we'll get one shot and then we'll be gone, So, and then the other thing that seems to be encouraged throughout the country is that if you have a connection to that catchment, absolutely welcome, and all your ideas and everything else is welcomed. And that's really quite powerful because you'll see it through different perspectives. So our catchment, for example, the Vaninis, even though they're not farming, they might have some ideas. So really open to that. And I think the ground rules that we set for the start are really important, as it is in any meeting, but it is, with respect, there's no finger pointing, there's no blaming, there's no shaming, all that negativity. We're actually there to be solution focused. So when we put that kaupapa out there, it just sets a really nice tone and we can move forward from there. And so touch wood hasn't been a challenge that, it's certainly not something I'm worried about until I need to be, put it that way.
Can I just have a word?
Yeah, sure.
And seeing the last slide there, right in the very middle of the points there, was about celebrate where you've come from. And I think we don't actually put that right to the top. We actually need to know that we've actually done a lot of work and we're now massaging around that next 10% rather than we've got to stop scaring people off. What's the point I was going to raise? And amongst some of the work streams there is regulation. It talks about the NPS on the water group. I looked at the NPS of fresh water and all that sort of stuff. Where does regulation fit within the Catchment Collective? Is it about implementing the regulation, or is it about just doing what is good practice so you can actually have a good water quality outcome? And it's not actually about implementing the rules of the Land and Water Plan or whatever.
So we obviously we work within a framework that's already been set now, NPS, NES. And so part of the thing we talk about is the regulations are the top down and the catchment group community led is the bottom up. Wouldn't it be great if we could meet them halfway? In fact, wouldn't it be great if we could meet them beyond halfway? Judith's here. There's talk about, am I allowed to say that? Yeah. There's talk about a person, MFE have given a little bit of money to regional councils, Environment Canterbury, to have a conduit between the catchment groups or the community-led thing and ECAN. So the comparison I make is kind of like with Bovis. How can we help MPI to help our rural communities? And it's a little bit like that with the catchment group scenario. So we know that there's not one size fits all, and if there's particular issues in a particular area that's like a 2.4 or something, then the group sort of really decides, are we going to make that all about that, or do we acknowledge that that's in law, and then we set about working a pathway. So we know the outcomes have been set and what's the pathway to get there, how long is it going to take, who do we need to be involved, what's it going to cost us. So that's the catchment action plan that they put in place. But absolutely, we can't ignore the rules and regulations. However, I believe fundamentally we've spent so much time talking about the problems and the challenges and the issues and the this, that and the other. People are going down rabbit holes and some of them are struggling to climb back up. So we're just really quite committed to being solution focused. So bring your problems and your challenges, but match it up with an opportunity and even better still a solution. Does that answer your question? Yeah. And if it gets too tricky, I just send them to Ian.
As some people say, and you've actually done the easy bit, now you've got the hard part. So I appreciate that, and we'll look forward to a yearly update and any other things, if you need a hand from the Zone Committee, that you'll obviously keep in touch with us. So thanks, Wally and Ange. So the next one is Judith, is it, with the
Yes.
Ashburton Lakes? And
Just while Judith's getting up there, Ange, there's a message online from Sydney saying, amazing job, Angela.
Okay, Judith, so the floor is yours. So that's in everyone's meeting papers, page 11.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thanks for having me along today to talk around a bit of an update around O2 Wharekai. I know it's an area of priority for the Ashburton Zone Committee. So you might recall, this is the second update we've given you of this in this format. We're just trialling and testing what works, what doesn't. I apologise for not having any copies for participants. Actually, it's interesting following on from you, Angela, just because so much of the conversation we have as an O2 Wharekai working group, obviously with landowners, but also with Crown agencies up there and Papatipa Runanga, is around those challenges of what needs to happen, what happens, what's doable right now on a farm property versus, and all those things. So some real things to resonate through there. So I just wanted to point out a couple of highlights for the period since we last gave the update in July 2022. So, I mean, some of the work across the agencies is very much business as usual and it ticks along, but there's some key rhythms to it. So if we think of our lake monitoring in Otu Wharakai, so particularly Heron Camp, Clearwater and Māori Lakes, as we move into the summer season, we pick up some additional monitoring as Environment Canterbury. Some of that is around recreational water quality monitoring, particularly Lakes Camp and Clearwater, but also we still do those water quality monitoring through the area. We have installed quite a few I don't know the right term, I'm not a scientist. I noticed Tim Davies online, he could perhaps answer this one. The suspended in the lakes, so the chains of monitors through. I think there's been a recent article we did on those. So there's lots happening around there. Also, the Department of Conservation does stream monitoring. Now, it's kind of confusing that different agencies do different parts, but that's mainly those stream monitorings on Department of Conservation land. And then we've also started in February some groundwater monitoring between Lake Camp and Lake Clearwater. And you might remember that coincides with the decommissioning of the long drop toilets by Ashburton District Council. So there's a little bit of looking at both the flow, movement of water and groundwater between those two water bodies, and also the nutrient loading within the water there. So that's getting to a point where we're getting some analysis of that data to date done. So that might be something we could bring back to the Zone Committee as a presentation in a future date. So, the scientists want enough data, not just one sample, to start to do that. So I'm not sure on the timeline, but I'll try and chase that up. But hopefully, and maybe in the new year, we could come back with a bit of a presentation on what we found with doing that monitoring. The next task we had, work stream we have, is around the on-farm nutrient risk assessment. So we've had one of our staff, Shane Gilmer, doing some work with the 4 stations up there, and more recently also with bringing in, there was Charlotte Glass and also the McFarlane Rural Business around given the mitigation for reducing nutrient loss from the farms, what's that impact of that? What are the options? What are the costs, etc.? What are the time frames for implementation? Because things can't happen overnight. So, and gathering that information and insight. Led by Aoraki Environmental Consultancy and Arawhenua taking the lead, but very much with the other runanga, is the cultural health monitoring that's been occurring, and there has also been an application made to the Ministry for a project to do more, Ministry for the Environment, that is, to do additional monitoring over a 3-year period. So that application is yet undecided. I know that the Mataronga Māori report, the cultural health assessment that was undertaken, is due, the report's near completion, and I'm not sure how the Runanga will want to share that. Do you think they'll want to? Yeah, after. Yeah. So at some point in the future, again, that's something else you could come and hear around what was found in comparison to 2012 when that work was last done. So Lynn's work's ongoing. Haven't had any updates since the last update. Very much focused on the new Pastoral Lease Act. And then Ashburton District Council has done quite a bit of work landing their 30-year plan, which was adopted. And I did include in your pack the pamphlet that they've recently put out it's a bit of a visitor's guide to protecting this area. So as with any community, we've got, people value the environments for different reasons, and you have conflicting values like 4-wheel drive. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Most people would say it depends how you use it. So we've given some guidance around what is and isn't appropriate for that environment. I didn't get much of an update on where we were at with bird surveys. I know there's a bit of a rhythm around both the game bird survey and also just some programs around geese management. And Forest and Bird previously have done a survey annually, I think, but I didn't get that in time for this report. I've mentioned the four-wheel drive use that's coming out of here. Pest plant control, this year for Department of Conservation and the landowners, they kind of join up on the pest plant, especially grey willow. And we have our joint agency comms group that meet. So that's across the Crown agencies. So Ministry for Primary Industries, Ministry for the Environment, LINZ, Department of Conservation, ECAN and Ashburton District Council. I just wanted to touch on, I noticed today, just in the Ashburton Guardian, they've published a story on the water quality results that you were presented with. It might have been the last meeting, which was some time ago. It's essentially the information we've had on our website as well. So I think, the idea of this was that if we could then bring you a specialist topic, we can do it that way. And Angela, you mentioned knowledge is power when it comes to working in groups, and that's very much some of the work the working groups, and which includes the 4 stations, have been working through. And we've got some information coming online to help inform, been working at the farm level on what we could do right now, and with the hut holders, etc., around decommissioning toilets, but there's also the longer term strategies around mitigations. So we've got that science information coming into us to inform what could be possible as a medium and longer term action plan, which includes in-lake catchment interventions on farm, and what are the costs and implications of those too. So that's, I guess, where as a working group we're going to, and when we've got that thinking all done and come up with a sort of draft proposal, we'll be able to bring that back as well. So that's still very much a informing stage. Yeah.
Thank you, Judith. Have we any questions? Val, we'll take one at the back. Val, do you want to just come forward so we can hear you on the speaker, please?
Yeah, sit down if you like.
Me neither. I'm interested that you talk about the on-farm nutrient risk.
Just come a bit closer so that the online can hear.
Yeah, that's it.
So the on-farm nutrient risk assessment.
Yep.
Have you got any results of that? I mean, if these activities which have seen the graphs for P and N in the lakes go up, and you've seen the graphs, how they've suddenly shot up. If those activities suddenly stopped, how long would it take for those lakes to recover, do you know? And you've got the next 5 years here. What's the outlook for those lakes up there that are so revered and treasured by the people of Ashburton and of Canterbury?
Yes, I think one thing that's become really apparent through this work is the level of interest and passion for protecting the environment up there from the landowners, the hut holders and the broader community is very strong. There's several things there because we've got a basin full of lakes, and each lake has its own distinctive geomorphology and hydrology, its residency time, its nature. It also is quite different in the landscape as to whether it's fully on Department of Conservation land versus, the rural properties. So one of the bits of work that I referred to that the working group are currently doing, and we have a hui early December to come together, is to look at each of those lakes and come up with what is the priority. One of those questions is, is this in a good state, bad state or okay state? And therefore, how do we prioritise which lakes need the biggest interventions first? So there's a real mix of, I'm kind of waving my hands around here, but it's a matrix of the status of the lake and how close is it in a really good state, reasonable state, poor or totally degraded? And therefore, what is it then the most appropriate actions around it to get the result? So there's bringing all that information together, and some of that includes what are the land activities that are surrounding that particular catchment, because not all lakes are fed in by farming activities.
Thank you.
Look, if I can just add to that, Val, one of the frustrations is that Clearwater is one of the lakes we're most concerned about, and it's been shut up in Conservation Park, or 95% of it, for 14 years, and it continues to degrade the longer it's been in Conservation Park. So it's not, working out the solutions, even if you can agree on the problem, is not necessarily obvious.
Yes, but if you go up there regularly, Ian, you'll see that there has been quite an amount of farming development up there, and I don't want to blame.
Not in the Clearwater catchment.
It is around Clearwater.
No, that happened nearly 12 years ago, so nothing's happened since.
Okay, we've got a question from John online. Can he?
Yep, he'll come on now.
John from DOC, John Ben.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Sorry, no video. I'm on Amazon Workspace. The cameras don't work on that for some reason. I was just going back, an update. There was a midwinter bird survey done a few days after the last meeting in July or August, whenever we had the last Ashburton Zone meeting. I haven't seen the results for that yet, but that's an annual survey that's done every year between Forest and Bird and DOC. And the annual sort of goose control takes place in December and January when the geese are fledging and molting. So that's upcoming. Yep, that's all I had to say.
Thank you.
I just realised I had another update, which was early in late February, March, there will be a rerun of the so NIWA does some work with Environment Canterbury around the lake submerged plant indicators, and one of the things I've learnt in being involved in this project is the role of our submergent vegetation in lakes as an indicator of health. So that was last done in 2017. So that field works, it's done with divers, etc. So that field work will be happening early next year. So it'll be really interesting to see what's changed from those previous surveys. Yeah.
I look to my left, up to my right, sorry, Chris. You'll learn.
Just quickly, so the eDNA has been talked about quite a bit over the last sort of 12, 18 months. And interestingly enough, it came up at a Arowhenua visit that we had with Hines School. Rosemary Klukas was there. She was the Taumata Co at the time, but I think she's recently changed jobs. But I think it would be really worthwhile having quite a bit more robust discussion on eDNA, and Rosemary was very pumping the brakes, really, really cautious around how much money, time, focus, energy is going into it versus the true value that she sees in it at this stage. So I'm just raising that flag, really.
Those eDNA samples were taken as part of the cultural health assessment work. So it's not part of our regular monitoring as Environment Canterbury. So that's where it was, that'll be why it's come up in that forum, because I know it is of interest to the Runanga at that time to let's collect and see. So it's not part of a routine monitoring sampling analysis that we do for our State of the Environment reporting.
Yeah, thanks Judith. I'm not sure if it could actually be a question for Tim as well. The amount of monitoring that's going on up there, do you reckon it's about the right amount, or is it always fund limited as to what you can do? Are we actually nailing into as a community, are we nailing into what the real problem is so that we know what the solution will be, or is it too broad, some of the monitoring we're doing at the moment?
I'm watching the screen to see if Tim's picked up. He's got asked a question. Somebody might have to send him a text. No, here he is.
No, I'm listening. If you want me to answer, Jude.
Yeah, you can go for it.
My camera's not working, but never mind. Kia ora koutou, everyone. And thanks for the question, Chris.
Look, our monitoring has increased quite considerably, particularly the in-lake work. So that's in Clearwater as well as in Heron, which gives us a much better indication of what happens between our monthly samples that are taken, and that's been really important. And then also actually within Gentleman Jim, if I've got the name right, Gentleman Jim Creek, which runs down into the Māori Lakes. So we've got a lot more than we've had in the past. I think we have a really good monitoring system, and I think once we start tying in some of I shouldn't preempt getting the funding out of MFE, but once the cultural monitoring comes in, hopefully when it gets funding, that'll add another dimension to it. So, my view is no, I think we've got a pretty good understanding of what's happening. There's always more that you can do around little things, but for the costs that we've, the investment we're putting in there, I think we're getting a really good understanding of what's happening and some of the dynamics of what's happening.
Yeah, that's good, Tim, because one thing I'd hate is to see, or the Regional Council doing a policy response with only very short-term snapshot of science information. So it's good you got the right amount going in to get the right story. So thank you.
Yeah, kia ora.
Can I just ask a follow-up question to that, Tim? When you say there's a good understanding of what's happening, is that the causes of what's happening or just that the lakes are degrading?
No, I think it's both. I mean, it's always, kind of one follows after the other. The causes, I mean, I think, we have a pretty good understanding. There's been some good modelling work done that, matches up with the data that have been measured. We understand that, we're getting a nutrient overload into these lakes. Exactly where that's coming from at all times, no, we're probably still a little bit shy, but I suspect we always will be. But I think we've got enough information to know that the types of interventions that are being proposed will make a difference.
Mary, a question. You have to come forward so we can hear, please.
It's been said that there needs to be significant voluntary reductions in farm inputs to make a difference to the deterioration of lakes' water quality. Has this happened? Has this begun?
Yes, that's actually been underway for a number of years. You might, at this committee, I'm not sure, Leo Ficci was the staff member who was involved originally working with farmers, and that included immediately, stopping certain activities in certain places, moving right back away from those more sensitive critical source areas like wetlands, moving stock right out. Since then, the work Shane's been doing more recently has been looking at, again, shifting some of those cropping for winter feed type activities right away and into different parts of the catchment, and reducing those activities as well. So those actions, they've been happening underway, and we did have I can't remember the figure that was what we thought we've already got out of the catchment that would have been there a previous season, but it was a significant number of, literally this winter versus last winter, as an example. So when we say that work's been happening, it really has been happening. Nobody's sitting doing nothing, but it is recognising that those changes on the farm system have big impacts for those farmers as well, and so it's, it is a measured approach. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I might direct this to Tim, if I may, and I'm pleased to see that we all feel we've got a good understanding of what's happening and we've got enough information. Well, if we've got a good understanding of what's happening and we've got enough information, what's the answer? Have we got any answer as yet, or is there a plan? Or
so that's what I referred to at the end of my presentation, where there's been some additional information that's been supported, research from scientists and also input from some agricultural experts that's coming together with us right now, and it's a live issue. And we're meeting next week, in a couple of weeks, the 5th, to actually have that conversation of building the action plan. So as well as the fact, certain farm activities have adjusted where they undertake certain activities or curb back the amount of that activity on their property over the past few years. And Ashburton District Council's decommissioned the long drops as examples of action now. This coming up with this more medium and longer term action plan is part of what we will map. One thing we're really conscious of is that some of those actions won't immediate, they're going to take money to implement, potentially from across several agencies, and will take time. But it's to come up with that visual of time frame, accountability and next steps. And that's what we hope to be able to bring back for, what's the resolution for Lake Emily, what's the resolution for Lake Clearwater, what's the resolution for Lake Denny, for example, at a future date. But I guess we're doing that with the Crown agencies and entities involved and the farmers. So that's that, very much like a catchment group working. That's that, and it's a hard discussion to have because these decisions have impacts. So.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, look, thanks, Judith, and you're absolutely right. It's each lake has to be and water body has to be treated separately. And I think it's worth remembering that and Tim, you'll beat me on the head if I say the wrong thing, but when Tim talks about nutrient overload, we're talking about in other catchments you'd consider the water pretty good water, but these are very sensitive catchments. And so in Gentleman Smith Stream, the nitrates are at 0.8 parts per million, and down in Eifelton we're worried when they get over 10, So we're dealing with hugely different factors, but the effect of a little bit of nutrients up in this very sensitive catchments is quite substantial. And you've got history and legacies and volatile climates. And so it's not, I know everybody wants solutions and causes and solutions and answers and some progress, but it's not an easy problem to solve.
I just wonder if I clarify what Angela spoke around MFE funding. So the Essential Freshwater Fund for MFE's part of that package, MPI and MFE both got a lump of money. They've recently announced that regional councils will get some money to fund a full-time equivalent staff member to help coordinate and connect catchment groups to enable that building capability and how councils engage with them. So at the moment our staff do that, I think Billy's name was mentioned, land management staff, etc. It used to be my role back in the day. But so would be having a specific role to act as a little bit of a place to connect with an ECAN. There's a couple of other opportunities around that, but one of the things we did ask as we develop up that job description is I phoned up Angela and said, look, we'd really like to understand from where you are in your role what would help, rather than us in Environment Canterbury write something and then it doesn't help catchment groups that are in operation. So we were seeking that on the ground feedback from sort of a north, mid, south perspective, so that we can fill that job description and make the appointment and get our money from MFE, which is funded for 3 years, which I think coincides with the other money. So I think it's a great opportunity just to think, how does council support? And at times, that question around regulation, sometimes just knowing more about the regulation's the important bit. That knowledge is power, because you've got an impression of what it might be versus what it actually is. So that, how do we have come along and give some visibility around that. So I think it's a great opportunity, but we don't want to trip over the works of the people in the role that Angela has for Mid Canterbury Collective or in other places in the region. Yeah.
Edith, did you have a question? Would you mind just coming up, please? Thank you.
I have in a way. I just would like to sort of sort of think about land use change, because it's actually been relatively recent. Our concern originally when we were communicating with District Council was the loss of Matagari on terraces, and those terraces are very green
and the little creek that it flows into is Whiskey Creek, so we know where that Whiskey Creek flows to. And the other thing that we do in our other role is wilding, and we're working alongside Paddle Stream, and it was so good to hear that Paddle Stream's water quality is really good. Why is it good? There's no green pasture in its catchment. But we do, it's not so long ago that I wrote to the District Council, and I've mentioned this before, at the time that the consent that Castle Ridge was applying for to renew its consent, and it was a rollover, and 10 kg per hectare per year does not sound a lot, but it is a huge catchment area that we look at when we're up there working, doing another role, that has been allowed to happen. And I know you've referred to it in a way about how that's being managed, but how this is a recent development. It costs a lot of money when a business is developing in this way, but they must have known about the possible impacts at the time that that was done, and in other areas too. How do you really make serious change to reduce that seepage down into those vulnerable lakes?
Well, there's a question that everyone's going to... Do you want to...
Yeah, just to kind of enlarge on that a bit, when we know that these lakes and this area is so vulnerable to very tiny amounts of nitrogen and other chemicals that are used, I'm wondering whether the action plan is going to be fit for task, because it could be argued that farm environment plans were not fit for the task, especially on this particular case.
Yeah, look, you raise some good points, and I think the challenge of what does land use change is one of those conversations that makes these discussions really hard, because it impacts those lives, but it's not, those conversations aren't not happening. Is that the right way? Yeah, that's part of the dialogue, but it is all, but it is recognising that could we get enough there, or do we have to go all the way there? Planning frameworks are interesting beasts, and obviously one of the reasons we know the lakes are degrading is the TLI index of the objectives and policies of the Land and Water Plan are not being met under the current activities that are occurring that our plan enabled to occur. What that means is that the plan framework, the rules that were in place to give it were not strong enough. So that's not disputed, okay? So the challenge then is we rewrite the rules and they become stronger and firmer, which will be the regulation coming down, and it's probably more of an because we do know we have to rewrite the rules under the National Policy Statement for freshwater. We've got a new plan to do. The other is the work from the bottom up that Angela talked about how do we get gains right now, because changing rules, even if we started that process tomorrow or last week, it will still be years away and doesn't change anything on the ground. So that was why so much focus has been on the action on the ground now, not a future. But it's recognising that regulation, the framework that regulation sits in, has a place. So although there's an action plan of what does it look like now, some of those actions will include what does the new planning framework need to look like, for example. So it won't be just, it'll be looking at those aspects too. And the other is we do have other national regulation that's come into effect since, which is the intensive winter grazing regulations. So there's other things that have come into play, in the last, even 6 months, that means they're part of what have to be given effect to. So what does that now mean for that catchment? And that's where we're working with the farmers as well. Yep.
Yeah, it's more of a statement, but in defence of what ECAN have been doing and with the farmers as well. Just about 12 months ago, there was a report came out from the Ministry for the Environment on the use of overseer. The number of 10 kilograms is a modelled number, and the report from on the overseer stuff is actually throwing everyone the curveball. what is actually going on up there. The only thing you can do really at the moment is a farm environment plan while you work through the rest of the framework and how you model that out. It is complicated, so I think we're going through the right process, working out what the causes are, what the effects are, how far you move certain activities into which parts of which catchments. It is a complicated beast, so I think you're going around it the right way, and the best you can do is you've got to take the community along on this journey because it's really complicated and it's going to hurt whichever way. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I just noticed on the last page you talk about, in addition, a public information day at the Lakes is being planned for summer 2023. So obviously we've got Mary and Val and Edith and Mr. Howden here. Is there an opportunity for those people who are seriously invested in that area, have been for a long time, to feel like part of that day?
Sorry, you picked me up on the other thing I forgot to highlight, which was we were looking at setting a date for that. So this was very much on the back of the working group talking, going, we know we need to engage more with those people who are passionate about this area that aren't a Crown agency or a landowner or whatever. So this, and some of that was to give some visibility around the work that's actually happening by hosting something up there, and I guess that was a question for the zone committee around what role do you want to play at that day, but also recognising the other NGOs that might also want to do. So that very much was a kind of an invitation, which I haven't failed to make, so thank you for picking that up, to go, shall we do something together to put some eyes and knowledge and understanding around that, but actually up there in the catchment.
I think it's a good point, but I think the zone committee felt a bit left out because this was all set up without us having any input into it, and then so we encourage you to come to report, which you've done, which is great. And I know it's before your time, Judith, so it's almost like it's running its own course now. Anyway, I don't know how the zone committee can coordinate anything that's already in place because you've got a lot of membership there already. We might just complicate it. Yeah. Did you ever?
It'd be nice to be invited along.
Well, it'd be nice to be invited along. Yeah.
Yeah, and accept that our role is also in community engagement, so we might be able to get some community engagement going. It would have been nice to be at the start of the conversation, so we could have engaged the community rather than when it's done. Is what my point was. Mary, did you have a question?
I would just like to make a very quick response to what Chris just said when he said it's very complicated. Well, I don't know that it is very complicated.
People can't hear you online.
I'll start again. I wanted to make just a quick response to what Chris said when his statement that it's very complicated. Well, I would dispute that it's very complicated. We have lake water quality that is declining quite significantly, and we have a lot of soluble fertilisers being put in a catchment, and gravity works from top to bottom. That doesn't seem all that complicated.
You've got to remember there's a lot of dockland in there which they're not putting fertiliser on, and the lakes are still going up. And what will be the key will be when all the science comes in, say if all the farming changes, which it's going to have to do to a different level, and the lakes are still going up, then what's causing that problem? So I think we've got to let it run its course, which is what, Judith, you can't jump to conclusions.
No, I'm
sure the farming's had a part of it.
I'm not jumping to conclusions. I'm not jumping to conclusions. I'm just a little bit sceptical that it's really complicated. I think that kind of clouds things a bit. We know that soluble fertilisers raise nutrient levels in water. That's not complicated, and we have that situation happening in the Ashburton Lakes. And once we have high nutrient levels, we'll get high algal growth, and that is extremely hard to ever reverse. So the issue is that it's not all that complicated, but it's extremely urgent. And I think that's what we need to really focus on, that this is a very urgent situation.
Well, I think Judith will tell that the farm environmental plans, the farmers are already doing what you're talking about. They are cutting the fertiliser back. And so we've just got to see all these different things.
I appreciate that.
So it's not like no one's doing nothing.
I do appreciate that farmers are significantly working on the issue, but I'm just...
Look, I mean, one of the things that have come out from some of the information to date is that, you know, you can do things in a lake to reduce algal blooms, you know, weed mats and, I don't know, you know, you can do things, but what the fundamental thing that needs to be different is less nutrients need to be getting to them, which is exactly your point, and that's very much the centre of the conversation. But it was also one of the pieces of work that we've, you know, that's coming to us is around what could happen at all a catchment, recognising that big chunks of the catchment aren't farmed, but are doing something. I mean, Lake Emily's not been farmed now for 15 years and hasn't improved. So, and then there's the in-lake, the whole of catchment and the whole farm. Oh, it might be Emma, yeah, Emma. So there is that fundamental basis of we've got to get less nutrients going in.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Yeah. They're a really high level. The challenge then is how do you do that in a way that's, and that pace of how quick does that lake need that change versus that other one is the other complexity. So I guess,
No, well, thank you, Judith, for coming along.
So I just want to highlight that public day isn't yet organised. We felt it was a good idea.
Yeah.
We thought February was good because there's still hut holders up there. We would love that to happen in partnership with the zone committee. You know, I don't know whether it's at co-hosting or whatever, and also recognising the role that the other groups and people that are interested could play. So I guess it might look like a done deal. This is us trying to give visibility, but that was part of the request was, shall we do that together? Because I know one of the other conversations we've had here is around that role of the zone committee, and I think the connection to the community is a key opportunity that some of the other agencies in the working group just don't have. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, Judith, and Dave, you'll obviously talk to Dave will, and we'd certainly be happy to be involved in helping organise an open day in February. Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. Thanks for all the questions, everyone. It was good. Edith, yeah?
It might be changing the subject, and I don't want it to turn.
Because we've moved on to the next subject.
Well, it is because pretty flowers are pretty flowers, and we all love them, and we know where they mostly are. But when we did our bird survey last year, we discovered a lot of Brussels lupin growing below Buick's Bridge and around and towards Blowing Point Bridge. So Forest and Bird, as ancient as we all are, got out our knapsacks and sprayed around. But we could see that that population, even though we felt we did quite a good job and had from the previous year been reasonably successful, that lupin population was burgeoning. So it's really good to know that this $5,000, I don't know whether it comes from Zone or wherever it might come from, is about to be spent by contractors to deal with the lupin. And we've been up there and GPS because we knew where they were, and our role, Forest and Bird's role, is not completely over because we thought we would go back, and they've given us the okay after the contractors have been just looking for those ones that'll be there next year, potentially seeding for next year. So it was a good story to know that professionals were going to be dealing with that problem.
Great. Thanks for that. So we'll move on to Dave, is it?
Can I quickly introduce Romy? She's got to run off. She's got a Zoom meeting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Romy. Hi, Romy. Fresh to Mid-Canterbury. So, there's certain people on the list following our March science update that she will be in touch with. So, just putting a face to the name, and then more information recorded.
Well, that's very nice. Would you like to make a comment, Romy, without putting you on the spot? You enjoying Mid-Canterbury so far? Is Ange a good boss? Right. Oh, well, welcome. Great. Well, welcome to you, and we'll look forward to hearing from you in the future.
So she's practically local.
If you know Sims, you're doing well. Good girl. Perfect. Oh, thank you. We'll look forward to seeing you again. Okay, Dave.
Cool. Thank you. So we're on to just note, I don't know if we covered it in the start actually, that our guest speaker, Pablo, who is going to be here today, is unfortunately got COVID, so we will get him back at another date, hopefully.
Have you circulated his?
Yes, I sent. You should have got an email about the field day he's having, which looks really interesting. Cool.
Will he be over COVID by then?
Over tomorrow, apparently.
Oh, right.
That's is it the 7th or the 8th or something, that field day?
Did everyone get that email?
Yeah, so we can, are we able
You're
to
more
share
than
that, or
you
is it?
can.
Yes, I think so.
He
Yep.
said that was fine.
Yep, yep,
In case
yep.
people would want to go, but
I'm not sure if he asked what we wanted for lunch.
you've got to stop at
Maybe
Sims
not.
on the way. I think.
Stop at Sims, yeah, it'd be good for me. Okay, so on to the last item, which is my committee updates. Now, we have some tentative dates for next year's meetings. They still have to be approved through ECAN governance to make sure there's not too many clashes, and Ashburton District Council as well. But it's something to start getting into your diaries. There is a mistake with the May date. It should be the 23rd, not the 26th. Just listening to what we were talking about with Otawharakai, perhaps we may, instead of a meeting in February, have that community engagement day. I'm thinking would be useful. And I'm also thinking maybe in January we have perhaps a short meeting and then devote some workshop time to looking at our action plan budget. There are a couple of people who applied for the Y Fund who weren't successful. We might want to look at what they might want from us, or whether we can contribute to that. We'll have Brett's something back from him, and we'll have a bit of time over the break to look at other opportunities where we might want to spend some money. Same as last year, we have 50,000 in the budget. Just summarising some of the points we had at the end of last meeting, we had a short workshop talking about what the committee thought was appropriate to spend the money on. Otawharakai was one of the things. Chris talked a bit about river margins and pest control. Thought it would be quite nice to be working in that area. Also, Mahinga Kai came up, and so we'll look for some inputs from Arawhenua and well, from all the runanga on any priorities they may have in the area. And community engagement, education, well, that's something I'm going to do in Otawharakai, which is pretty good. The two funds that didn't get funding in our area that I'm aware of from the Waitaha Action to Impact Fund were Upper Rakaia ungulate. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. Basically pigs, ungulates. They applied for some funding, and also for the restoration of McKinnon's Creek, that group applied for some funding as well. So that might be something we'll look at. Not sure if you're aware. McKinnon's? I don't know where it is. Do you? Yeah. So there's some things to think about. And yeah. Oh yes, I can introduce Henry. So Henry, do you want to come up the front and we'll put you on the spot? Probably quite a few of you know Henry already from his previous role working with the Ashburton consent reviews in the planning section, but Henry is now our new zone lead for Ashburton, and I'll let you say a bit more about yourself, Henry.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, I know some of you through the consent reviews. So yeah, Henry Winchester, I've been at ECAN for about 6 or so years. I was a consent planner for a couple, and then I went off and joined the planning team and worked on the Ashburton consent reviews, which is almost finished, which is great news. But hopefully I can come back and give you an update in the early new year about that. But otherwise, yeah, really excited about this new role with the Ashburton zone team, and yeah, getting stuck in. So yeah. Happy to help with anything that you need.
Obviously, Carter's Creek is on your list.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, it is now. Well, welcome, Henry, and we obviously are familiar with you, and I think it's great that we're getting a leader back in the district, because we've had Janine Holland, and you're following some good people, so it's good to have
some big shoes to fill from Janine. So,
you'll be fine, but it's good that people can have someone they can go to. That's great.
Yeah.
So I applaud ECAN for doing that, whether that's Judith or Ian or David or whoever.
Is Henry planning on giving a report each time as to some of the activities that are going on? I think we've been a bit lean on that in the last 12 months since Janine's gone. Is that part of your role where you can give us an update?
I'll have a chat to Judith and figure out what we're going to do with that. Given I've only been in the role for a month, I'm still trying to
Well,
find
that's why
my
we want to
feet.
get in early on.
I figured that might be the case, Chris.
Oh, that's great. So thank you. Nice, Henry, and I'm sure everyone will get in touch with you too.
Just continuing on from my report, if people think of things over the holiday break, I mean, this is our last meeting for the year, around what we do with our funding, things we should be looking at, please flick me an email, because I'd like to come back to that late January meeting, prepared for a good workshop on that.
The other thing we talked about quickly was the opportunity to visit Coldstream Estate with the Arowhenua, with the project that they're doing potentially in April.
So April.
I think that's when they were going to be ready again. Doc was holding them up or something, but they thought it should be good to go.
Do you have much to do with that, Les, or that's not really in your area, the Rangitata? No. What about you, James? Do you know much about it? Or? A little bit. So we'll follow that up.
Yeah, I had put in there no meeting in April because it clashed with Anzac Day, but we could do a field trip.
We do it in May.
Yeah, we'll see what works out with them. Yeah.
I think there's some general business. Jen, you had a subject you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I just wanted to update you on Staveley Camp. It never occurred to me before we got the report about the Y Fund to report to the Zone Committee about our funding there, but we were successful with the Y Fund. And so we got 3 out of 4 of our funding applications approved. And yeah, just to say that Staveley Forest is probably the most biodiverse spot on the Mid-Canterbury Plains, and we have a lot of the same sort of aspirations as the Zone Committee, including community engagement, and it's a really good place to come and gather because it's purpose-built for that sort of thing. So just wanted to let you know that, yeah, that's been a great result for us.
Is it possible we could have a Zone Committee meeting up there?
Yes, absolutely.
For us to get on the road, aren't you, Les? So maybe we should, what would be a good time up there, sort of late summer or early spring?
Yeah, either of those.
Dave, we might look at getting out and about.
No wasps there. I'm on the case.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for that. I'm glad you got some funding, and we will have a meeting there this evening.
Great.
How many meetings are we planning on actually having? There's a lot.
Well, we have.
Vice Chair.
No, I'm asking the committee as to how often do you think we should be meeting? That is the numbers that we can have.
We have to have a minimum of 4 meetings per year, official meetings. The rest of it can be workshops or field trips or whatever we decide to do, but a minimum of 4 official meetings. Jen, you might want to make it a bit of a working bee if we go up there. I don't know.
Sure.
And one last question. Can you tell us what the funding went towards for the Staveley?
What it went towards?
What the funding was for?
So it's for the whole project, the whole sort of strategic overview of the camp, which is largely to get rid of the weeds and keep the integrity of the bush intact, but with a specific focus on community engagement. So that will include actually an oral history project, a social and ecological history of how on earth that 10 hectares of forest was saved on Sawmill Road, which nobody has yet been able to tell me.
If you had a task, as David said, probably don't want us up there with our chainsaws, but maybe with a weeding gear or something, or clearing, we might as well be useful.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
So you work out something like something to do, we'll move around.
Okay, great.
Sure thing. Kia tātou katoa te atu whai o te tātou hiki hiukarai me te ara o te atu me te whiwhinga teitanga ki te wairua tapu ake ake ameni.